that, I want to share with you the program that I did in 2019. That's before the pandemic happened. So I brought one young American, Jen Naylor, to Indonesia for 3 weeks to experience Indonesia, the cultures. I choose this short documentary because it's kind of like perfect with the theme that we are discussing today about like bridging divides, healing communities. I think by understanding each other and by experiencing their life that's different from us, that we can start having a dialogue and have a discussion. This is not the entire films because it was 17 minutes. So I'm gonna give you a glimpse of one of the a section of the travel that Jen is experiencing, Ramadan, which is Muslim holy month. For a whole month, you go fasting, and then we breaking the fast at the end of the day, and then she kind of like immersed with the experience.
It's a really safe feeling. I feel safe.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know how else to describe it. It's like I don't know. It's like protected, kind of. Yeah. Hi. Hello.
Are you fasting today?
I am. What time is it?
How you feel?
4. It's 4, so only 2 more hours. I feel really thirsty.
So where are you now?
I'm currently at a breaking of the fast ceremony with the First Lady of Indonesia. I've been fasting all day and almost sundown of Ramadan, so it's really exciting.
How do you feel?
I feel good. Where are we?
Vienna,
Yeah.
in the Borobudur
Yeah.
Buddhist temple,
to
World
do-
Culture Heritage.
Oh, yeah.
We are in Nirvana,
Yeah, Nirvana.
in the
Yeah.
heaven.
Heaven. Oh,
Yeah,
Nirvana.
we are sitting
yeah.
together. We are sitting together with
In
Buddha
heaven.
Gautama in Nirvana in the early morning.
Okay.
So you record the fire?
Yeah. I record you.
Yeah, same too. We are recording same thing.
Nah, kalau sudah sempurna, dia akan terbangnya pun akan baik. 10, 9, 8, 7,
6, 5,
Tuh, cepet
4,
banget naiknya.
3,
Panas
Okay, so that's a part of a video that's 17 minutes long, kind of like in a documentary called like a diary journey of her experience when she experiencing Indonesia for 3 weeks. So as a documentary filmmaker, before I create a story, I always ask myself, like, what is it that kind of trick, like what kind of a story that I want to tell? Because documentary is like real things, real life, that daily stuff or things that we're interested in, and how do we want to capture it, right? There's so many different genre even in documentary. Is it a personal, is it observational, is it character driven, is it like collective? So as a director, to 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 create something, it's all, for me, it's always come to the question, what is it that is important that I can amplify? And documentary is a very strong tool because it's something real. You don't create it, and when you're behind the camera, you are just as a vehicle for the story to come to you. You don't fabricate it. You don't create things that does not exist. And from that, you can create different storytelling that is strong and that can connect with your audience. As a the video that I show you is pretty much about this journey of a young kid in America who's never been to any other country and experiencing different things. So the visual sort of like giving strength to that experience, and it's from her perspective. It's not from my perspective, it's not from other people's perspective, but it's from her perspective. uh, that's why we pick, with this video, we pick like a kind of a diary first person style to tell the story. So yeah, when directing, it's always like, what are my intention, and what are am I amplifying a message? Is it for advocating, or is it something just to like let the people knows of like certain things that you're interested in? So that's, as a director, that's always the question I have to ask before I turn the camera. And the approach before I pick a story, I always like, if I'm interested in like something, I will research them, and then I will kind of like create like a connection and rapport, and so that like before I turn the camera, I have like connection, so that when I turn the camera on, my subject will not think that I'm there. Because like I love that kind of like type of documentary where you just observe and the story will come to you. So for the part like bridging divides and healing communities, I feel like, yeah, documentary is the right tools. The storytelling with the documentary is the right tools to create little video snippet, because there's so many aspects in your daily life that you can pick and point, that you can use to sort of like ask, what is the problems? How are you solving it? How do you show it, and how are you solving it? I think that's the strength of documentary. So I would love just now to kind of like having a conversation, I guess, like what you guys think of documentary and how, if there's anything that I can, facilitate to answer based on my experience. And, how would you think now with what happening in America, what is the best way to bridging divides and healing communities? What is it that like spark your inspiration, and what are you thinking about it?
For me, Keith and I do documentaries once or twice a week. We have artists who talk about their work, and we also have artists who demonstrate their creative process. So, and then there's sometimes they're on a particular topic. Okay. But what I love are the documentaries that I see on POV, on PBS. And also I love the storytelling. I don't know if you see those at all, but there's a lot of storytelling that's done mostly on New England public media now. They're rebroadcasting them. And there where people get up and without notes or anything, they just tell a story. They usually have 3.5 hours. And I just find them so, because they're telling something that's sort of raw, right?
Yeah.
Another thing we've done in the past, Dona's really done the videoing of it. We've had for 20 years, we had children read poetry from kindergarten to 8th grade. And many of them were immigrants from other countries. And their poems sometimes were so raw, so powerful. So that was another example where we've done documentaries, which certainly bridge the gap in that case. And it's something I would like to do here in the Berkshires again, too, because there's something about kids telling their story and finding words to express themselves. And poetry is often a very good way, to do that.
Documentary, because of the intimacy and the rawness, can connect, and that's what makes documentary is like a perfect medium to create a healing in a community, because from the personal story, like you just mentioned, the personal story that you hear from the kids and reading the poems or doing other activities, and then you can put together something that other people can see and can watch, and then they can connect to themselves, right? Because most of documentary, that like a strong documentary, is always like when you feel like, I feel that I completely understand what that person go through, or what he said, what she said in that experience in our personal level. I think that's always like the sign of a good documentary, where you feel that connection in a very deep personal level. And the art, when we, if you see all of this interesting, like a documentary, there's always like a message that the director usually want to convey. Sometimes it's hard to hear or see, because it's heartbreaking story, when it's like about conflict or war or stuff like that. Even again, like if you see some of like investigative journalism documentary, or like documentary style, that like a lot of news now putting it up like on Vice or NPR or other like news outlet, that showcase the social injustice, it gets you thinking. So that's also like my reasoning why I choose documentary, because it has the ability to get you thinking of like, then what can I do? And you go deeper into like, not just like, the scratching the surface, but like, what is it about certain things, like let's say about this issue, what is it that divide America at this moment? What's divide the Berkshires, and how are we create something that heals this? I would love to hear from young people to talk about like, hey, if you were to make a documentary, or if you were to make some art that can bridge the divide, what are you making? What is in your head? What do you think caused this divide, the separation? Because everybody look up to America, right? Like, you are the superpower, you have like you are the benchmark of all the high standard. But now what is happening with America? What is happening in the Berkshires? Why do we need to heal? This is like very interesting, for my perspective, very interesting documentary. If I were to make, I'll ask you guys, what is it? What caused this divide in our regions? And that from that question, right? What caused the divide? And then we can investigate how are we bridging it, and then how are we healing together. That's a really solid, interesting documentary in my head. You guys tell me what you think.
So how would you go about doing that? Ask people those questions?
Yes. Yeah. If I were directing it, what the first thing I would do is really, I'll do research. There's a lot of plenty of news that showing all that, right? Issue of like, discrimination, racial intent, like conflicts, or like just a little thing that, but that's what. And then from there, you ask people a question, and then from the question, we do another question, like how are we go about this? And then from that answer, we can create a content, a story that will help us, like help us, like showcase that change is possible, that healing is possible. So that's what documentary is. You can just bring your camera everywhere, right? Even with your cell phone now, it's you can ask those questions, put it together, and then of course there's always B-roll. There's always like, there's a different level of production, of course, but like camera is just the tools, but what you doing with it? Are you posing the right question? Are you gonna like creating the right all the people that you interview? That's the story, because it is, the people is the story. You just capturing it, and then you put it together. I feel like asking the right question will be like the meat of the story in documentary filmmaking, and get people to talk about things that otherwise. See, the other thing that like really crucial in documentary, I feel like, it's like you need to be able to get people to be honest with themselves.
Yep.
Like, so that they're not like, it shouldn't be fabricated. You should be honest. You should let the camera just roll and let it capture what is going on. And then, because nowadays, like, what's fakes and what's real, what authentic, what's not, right? So even in documentary now, everything is blurry in terms of like who can I trust, who can I, you know. So like the style of documentary also, that's that's your choice. What do you know, what kind of a style you want to have. But at the end of the day, a good documentary is the one that is you're capturing the authentic of your subject. There's no object in documentary, it's subject. As a director, you are just, again, you're just vehicle. You don't put the, you know, you don't put things together that is not exist. Like for my experience, I was doing a documentary about militia in Indonesia. In my head, I was like, oh, this guy just want to go home, but they can't because he's experiencing, you know, like he was part of this conflict that actually he cannot go home. He has to, if he were to go home, he has to be responsible for what he done. But when I was on the field, the story completely changed.
Yeah.
You know, and then I just have to like document what it is like, and that it you know, what I have in my treatment and what I have on the ground, it's completely different. But then it is that subject story. I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna follow you and you're gonna tell me what is it that you want to tell me. And then I make the film of him telling his story. So it's not completely my story. It's never like, yeah, documentary filmmaker is like, it's not my story, it's their story. I'm just a vehicle.
You know, I remember during the Vietnam War,
yeah,
I remember seeing on the local television channel this young man talk horribly about killing the Vietnamese, you know,
yeah.
And he was recorded on the local news. Later, I found out that he was a student of one of my friends. And when he saw what he had said, he was horrified. And that changed him, just listening to what he had said. So that was the good news, you know. There's somebody who has a sign up right across from the elementary school in Lenox on 183 that says "Unmask the children," right?
Yeah.
And there's somebody who has a big flagpole right in the middle of West Stockbridge, you know, right across from the Moffat's house. You know which one I mean?
Yeah.
And all during Trump's era and before, he had Trump on the, you know, he had the US flag on top and Trump next.
Yeah.
And now he has a different flag and I don't know what it is. I can't really read it's a white thing with a circle. I don't know what it is. But, you know, asking people, I don't know how to bridge the gap.
My agenda is promoting West Stockbridge and the Berkshires, and I have some other avenue ideas. One is the cable system for Berkshires and West Stockbridge, local access, local origination on the cable system may be a vehicle. And Karen and I are on the vision committee of the West Stockbridge, and we're working on the website of the town, which is partly about marketing and making living there easier for people in terms of what they can do and need to do. And also I have a video of the performers, the music players in West Stockbridge during the festival or the market.
The farmer's market.
Farmer's market, which I'd also love to turn into promotional materials for West Stockbridge.
Right. See, like all of this B-rolls or footage that you took down, it could be, yeah, it could be turned into like a story, like of the town, right? And because you're everywhere and you're documenting this, so that's again, like, it just need to be put together, because b-roll is just like a raw footage, right? Like raw material that you can put together, and then from that b-roll too, you can like, yeah, then like, you interview several people, what do you want the town to be, and then it turned into like a really nice, a minute or two documentary about the town. Like, let's say it's a vision, right? Like, you talk about the vision, that kind of thing. So like turning like b-roll into a story, because b-roll itself, you can just screen it, sure, but what is the story, right? Like, let's say you want to make short documentary about farmers market, who, like, we can get like people who involved in it, like, why is it important to have a farmers market, and then what is the benefit of it, and then how people react to it. See, that's like every Thursday in West Stockbridge, every Saturday in Great Barrington. So farmers market as a story, it's a really good story, because we're living in a very abundant and very rich farming culture. That's a story, and then you can cultivate that, and actually that can be used as well as bridging divides, because when you're in a market that's setting a type of traditional setting where people from walk of life, different background, like, everybody is like rich, poor, farmers, like, like actors, actress, Hollywood, that just go into farmers market. They're experiencing the same thing. And then some people make a conversation, some people make a dialogue. That could be like a really nice short documentary about, like, how farmers market bridging gaps, bridging divide, and as a communal effort to do the healing within our community. Because like, if you're in farmers market, you don't point at each other. It's like, oh, you pro this, you pro that, oh, I don't like you because you're doing this, or you know what I mean, you just like really enjoying the abundance, like the blessing that you have in the Berkshires. See, that's farmers market as a theme. You can use it as and you guys, I know
Bridge, yeah.
you've been into art, like you mentioned before too. Imagine all of these artists in the Berkshires sharing their thought about why is this separation between people happening, through your photography, to your cooking, to your through music, through, I don't know, like so many other things. Like, if we use our mediums of art and then put it into a story, we can create so much stuff, so much like story, so much documentary, either short or long form, or see, it's amplifying a lot of things. Like your group, for example, your art group, Karen, Dawn, and Keith, from your group alone, I'm sure there's so many stories that you can bring out, your long experience and thing that can inspire young people to see things differently, to approach things differently, to learn from your wisdom, because generational gap is also a problem, right? In that we're facing right now. The young people is just like into their digital, or like the older generations, like, oh, but like how are you bridging that too? How you make a connection so that you can have a healthy, good dialogues? See, like, I feel like everything can be turned into a documentary and story.
Now, Keith and I, go ahead, Keith.
Well, you've talked about some of this and a little bit how you form stories. I'm just kind of curious about, and you talked about how the story might change, but the particulars of how you go about laying this out in a film format, and how you create your story and lay it out visually, and then the story that presents it that lays out visually, and the idea of the A roll versus the B roll, and and how you approach creating those from the start. And then once you've got what you do, it's you can't really create the whole story, it sounds like, at least to me, until you've actually got your footage. So
well, yeah, there's different way of creating the story, right? Like for certain story, let's say subject, like a character driven story, you follow that person, what you think is interested with that person, and then I'm gonna do this. Okay, let me rephrase that. For character driven story, you want to tell that story, so you follow the character, you interview them, and then from the interview you create the story, the narratives, and then you build the narrative, like you build the visuals based on what this person interviews. Or sometimes when you do a verite style, people will just talk about their experience or what they want to say, and then from that you build the story, then you can lay out the b-rolls, and then adding other stuff, like for example you can add animation to make the story clearer, or like infographics if it's needed, or like other, like a research, like a archival research. So it's really is based on like what style and what is it that you want to create. Most of what I do now, let's say most of the short mini documentary that we did for brand, we usually get the story by doing the interview first, because that's the meat of the story. When we have the interview, we understand the message that we want to convey, or what this, what is it that we want to tell to the audience. And then from that we figure out of like, okay, we need a verite, or we need a certain b-rolls, or we need archive. And then we create this 2-3 minutes or 5 minutes now, like for mini short documentary. That's the process that we usually currently do in terms of like from start to finish. Or sometimes I do like some research. There's a news, I'm interested in that story, in that news, that person who's doing cleanup on some river, why is he doing that? And then I interview that person, and then from that we're having a story, what's behind that, and then we shoot more about, to get the b-rolls, and then we lay out the story. And then, not to mention you have, aspect of music, and then sound mixings and other stuff that makes the story complete.
Oh no. So what would the primary role of the director is to, or the roles of the director? I mean, if you're doing it, you might be doing everything, but like what how do you define what you do as a director versus you might be using other people for?
well, for director, you want you so the story is the message. So as a director, for example, I want to make a story about the, you know, how farmers market bridging divides and healing community. So that's I want to make that documentary, right? So what
Mhm.
I am doing now, I'm gonna identifying key players and doing all the interview. So I'm deciding in terms of like how it's gonna look like, and then I will hire someone, or like I hire camera person, I hire a sound person to do, you know, interview and recording and b-rolls. And then I could then bring in editor to edit the piece, and then I bring in sound designer to sound design it, and then color correct it. But as a director, I have a vision of like what the story, what's the message. So that's the role of a director. You deciding on what is the message that you want the films to be like currently we are working on, oh, just last summer we create a mini documentary about uh Italian deli in Albany that's been running for 75 years. So the intent of the documentary is for the family to preserve their legacy, right? For them to have something as a keepsake. So we then go to Albany, interview with members of the family. Why is this, why is this deli is so important to your family and to your community? What is it that you're looking for? From the interview, we create the story. And then we do the, we're filming, the B-roll, and then we build that into a 5 minutes mini documentary. So, and if it's an advocacy video, it's completely two different things. It's still like a documentary style, but if it's advocacy, you want to have kind of like your video is a witness, it's a tool for advocacy. If it's like for campaign, like a PSA style, it's for, so the director role, it really is deciding that the message will come across. So that's why you're building your team to have that done, basically. In documentary, most of the time they call it they want, like, when you want to pitch some story, they want a treatment. So the director usually envision what it is, but it just that's just a guidance. Treatment is a guidance, because we know in documentary things will changing once we're filming or once we're on the field. So that's the difference between like documentary and non-documentary, like a fiction or non-fiction. Fiction, we know for sure, oh, if I have the storyboard, that's what we're gonna shoot. And then at the end of the shoot, we're gonna have like a certain things that is already set. But in documentary, really, if it's observational, another different things, like what do you want to observe. Like when I was working with a Japanese filmmaker, where they're very strong in like a socio-anthropology observational style, they can film like years of footage, and then they turn it down into like narration, like a voiceover narration, because they know exactly what it is. Or sometimes it's just quiet. So like that kind of things. And I don't know if you guys watch a Grey Garden, about this lady who having like a hoarding problems.
I haven't seen it.
Um,
It's called Grey Garden.
yes, it's kind of like observational, like very intimate. Like we understand the struggle, but we're like, you know, you just be with them. Also, like I used to, I have one short documentary following this prima ballerina. So like she is like world renowned ballerina that has kind of like degenerative muscular like disease that like she end up like having tremor and all that, and she cannot, you know, she cannot do anything, but she was dancing with Barifnikovs and all that. But then like I follow her one day, just one day in her life, where like, you know, this disease kind of took over. It's I just want to help, but I can't. I just want to observe, you know, like I just
Right. That's not your role.
Yeah, so I have the camera, and then by the end of that one day, I make a piece that like, oh my God, you know, like I feel bad as I just want to help, but then I want to tell her story because she want me to tell her story by observing her. There's no narration, there's no voiceover, there's nothing. I'm just silently following her. So that's an
the Ozu, you know him, OSU, a Japanese filmmaker from I think the 50s. He did some very just observational family stories.
Yeah.
And almost no narrative.
Yeah.
They were very peaceful, meditative, but deep.
Yeah. Yeah, because I like, to be honest with you, I like that type of documentary where you just observe, because I feel that is the most like honest present, like when the subject present itself, when they really trust you, they just let you in. And most documentary, good documentary, if it's like subject driven or character driven, is that like when people have no what you call it, no inhibition of themselves, you know, like they just like being honest, like, because if it's, you can tell in a documentary where the subject is being real,
edited,
or they're faking it, or they, you know. That's why as a director, I think that's also like a very crucial to understand, is your subject a reliable narrator, or is, you know what I mean? So like, because like that's the part of I think like director need to see, is this the story that is actually the story, or is it actually that, you know, or this person
they wish were the story.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you can approach documentary in so many different ways, but like don't mistaken the reality TV and documentary is not the same.
No.
Because now, like, you know, there's so many like reality TV kind of like resemblance, they claim to be resemblance to documentary, but it's not. There's a lot of in reality TV, there's a lot of fabrication behind the scene that we're not seeing. But yeah, like,
so if you have how do you go out, how do you go about picking your subject?
For me,
your character, maybe I should say better. You know, how do you, you know, what process, you know, if character driven stories are so strong, how do you know when you have a character that's a good character? Or is it just intuition, or is it?
I think I do. When I did mine, I usually it's coming from a research. And for one example, when I choose my thesis film, about this militia that's like living in the border of Indonesia and Timor, where the conflict is. I was just thinking about like how does it feel to have a home but you cannot go home. I think that's like my key deciding moment why I choose Indonesian Timorese militia who want to be Indonesia, like to stay in Indonesia, but their cultural ancestor is in Timor. So when I want to pick subject, it's like when there's something they want to say. Like I can choose you, kid, as a subject because you're an artist, right? Why do you want to be artist? Why do you pick the medium you want to pick? And then you can be a strong character subject for documentary filmmaker, right? If you're willing to tell me all those, your process, your intent of as an artist, what's your message that you want to convey, what kind of a story you want to tell. I mean, I can also make story about Karen and Don't. Like, why are you so involved in the community? Why do you always have your camera? Yeah, see, from that question, I can make any story from any people I meet, because like, it just like everybody carry a story. It's just matter of like, do they want me to tell the story? Do I find it strong enough that can inspire people, or that we can see a lesson from it, or that we can draw something to think about, that kind of thing. That's kind of a story that I feel always I feel drawn into, like inspiration when somebody, like our documentary that we're working on, this one guy who has such a passion for life that one leg is not an obstacle for him to keep on living. He'll like he's still towing trucks with one leg, like. And for me, that's my inspiration as a director. I want story that is inspiring other people, that we can gain something, that we can learn something. Like some people
There were two, I wanted to tell you about, there's a guy who's a member of the Guild, and he's given us 2 talks. His name is Hank Kersley, and he's in his 90s. He's a Black man, and he was an art teacher. And his story, he's told us his story twice, totally different stories, much about his youth, growing up and being an art teacher at first. And he also, what he paints is like Black cowboys and all, he paints about these important issues in his life as well. And I wish we could get these stories into the schools, right? Get him, because he's such a kind person. He's very unflappable, and he doesn't attack anybody. He's very calm. So he's easy to listen to and easy to hear from.
right. Yeah.
Bridging gaps.
Yeah.
So can we agree to meet again and work on a project together?
Definitely.
I'm for it.
Yeah, I think, when you think of directing something, you always have to ask yourself, like, what is it that I want to share first? And get your inspiration, and then sometimes it's really good to brainstorming with other filmmaker, with other artists. And then I think another thing, actually, filmmaking is actually very communal endeavor. Even if you're the director, that like you have a certain things that you want to say, but it won't work without like this community crew that you're building together to make it happen. And that's what sometimes we forgot. It's not film, filmmaking is not one person type of thing, even though now there's a lot of like, oh, I can do it all by myself, but it's actually, it's never, you're never alone. You always have other to support you in that. And if somebody say, oh, that's my film, meanings like it's only individual, that's kind of a red flag for a filmmaker to claim that it's my film. It should be like ours, because the collective of it. And documentary, again, like documentary as an art form, it's never an individual endeavor. It is a collaborative. It's involved everyone. That's why the message is always have to be like, you know, it is collective message. But
I think the farmers market music would be the best topic. But I'm biased.
Find out what other people think.
Yeah. And yeah, if you guys want to discuss more on like how to, you know, to make documentary, or how just bounce ideas back and forth, and like, you know, I'll be more than happy to, and we'll be more than happy because George also here, and you guys more than welcome to also come to our place, and we can have coffee and talk some more.
Great. I'm for it. I just looked on my phone and I have 44 live music recordings.
Of the farmers market?
Yeah.
I don't know for sure if they're all farmers market, but mostly.
Is there anything else that it's that we want to have a discussion?
We could discuss traffic and crosswalks in West Stockbridge. It would be great video. People and parking.
You know how they solved a problem one time in Mexico where people weren't paying attention, pedestrians crossing? They got a clown to teach people to watch out for the crosswalk. And he was very successful in changing behavior.
That's a good documentary for like, you know, PSA documentary on like,
We can do both.
Yeah.
Keith, what are you thinking about?
Good for the winter.
No, I appreciated this. It's an interesting take on the perspective of what the conceptualization of the film versus the actual physical making of it. Because there's so many technical stuff in physically making it, but the conceptual stuff it needs to be strong and needs to be well thought out and well put together in order to because technically it needs to be good too, but or at least pretty good. But the story seems to be the main driving force here that you've been talking about.
I was thinking about the questions that we ask. We have about 25 questions that people ask artists. And so they're sort of the structure and the backbone that we usually start with those questions and then just sort of let them go, you know, let them talk. But it would be interesting for you to look at those questions, and, you know, we don't want to do a lot of editing in this particular format because that's takes so much time. But I think those questions that we ask, sometimes we only ask 2 or 3 of them, but they set the stage and allow the person to talk.
Right. Yeah. I think really, if you're interested in like starting to like making a documentary or directing one, is just, ask yourself, is it, why am I doing this? Why is it so interesting to me? What is it that I want to share with the audience? I think from that, then you can start building the treatment. And then once you have the treatment, like the guidance for you to to start, you know, get the story, then you can do the technical aspect. And you're right, kids, like your camera, your, you know, that's technical. Even though you can always hire the best DP, the best editor, the best crew, right? But as a director, if you don't have a strong vision of like what is the story that you want to convey, and what's the message, or what is it that you want the audience to take on from your films, then it's not gonna be a good documentary. I mean, you know, director is the one that kind of like lead your crew. You can, again, like it can be like a really great visual because you hired the best DP, but it's the stories there. See that, yeah. Well, it's 6 o'clock. I think we only have an hour. I really appreciate you guys for, you know, having this conversation with me and sharing what your experience, and allowing me to share mine. I hope it's you know, useful.
And I hope we can share it with others and meet the needs of looking at young people and helping us understand what they think we need to do to bridge the gaps.
Yes, yes. And yeah, feel free to reach out to me if there's anything further that you guys want to talk about or share or anything at all. We're here.